Welcome to this new episode of Renegade Talk with the one and only, the real DiscoDoc, otherwise known as Carl. Hi.
Hello. Hi. Hi, Lisa. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, it's really nice to meet you too. Thank you for taking the time. It's really great to have you on the show.
Pleasure.
So, we're going to dive into the whole reveal situation and how that went down. But first of all, I want to start at the beginning and know a bit more about you and how this came about, because it's quite a special idea you had with the DiscoDoc. So I want to know how how your creative mind worked to get to there.
Yeah. Okay. I was actually looking back at some dates earlier to remember to piece together little bits myself
Yeah.
as to how it all sort of came about. And what happened was 3 days after High Ren was released, my meditation teacher, a bloke called Rowan, put on Facebook. He put a link to High Rem and one word. It just said stunning. That was it.
Okay.
And that's really where it all began for me. I think the following week I was at his house doing a meditation session, and afterwards we had some fruit teas and things, and we were chatting. And he said, "Did you watch that video?" And I was like, "Yes, I did." And when I pressed play, a couple of minutes in, it was like I was saying to Uncle Ray, it was like time stopped still, like it just had that sort of I don't know, it hit me in the chest, it hit me in the solar plexus, and
Yeah.
it was like nothing will ever be the same again, which sounds so dramatic for a song, but it really did. It really, really did. It was just one of those moments for me. And I played it to my wife, put it up on the TV on the big screen and played it to my wife, and it was the same for her, It was just like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah. Yeah.
In the best possible way.
Yeah.
And then I thought the next bit happened much sooner, but the stats don't lie. When I look back at my channel, then it wasn't until July, so December, 3 days after High Ren came out, I first saw it. Rowan shared it. It wasn't until July that I started a YouTube channel, and it wasn't actually DiscoDoc YouTube channel to begin with. It was at the time I was training to become a counsellor. So I am now a qualified and practicing counsellor in the UK, but at the time I was training. And so I set up this YouTube channel, and I tried to record a reaction to Ren. There weren't many reaction channels to Ren at the time, particularly that I knew of. Certainly not like there are now. And there are a few. There are certainly not many taking the therapist angle.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, like so many people, when I saw myself on the screen, heard my voice and saw my face on the screen, I just didn't like it. I couldn't bear it.
Yeah.
And I thought, who the hell is going to want to watch this? That's just how it went for me at the time. And it was that, combined with the fact that there was so much that I wanted to say in response to this music, particularly Ren's music, including humor.
Yeah.
The way that it made some of his songs made me feel, I wanted to respond with humor. And I realized very quickly that it was frankly inappropriate for me as a trainee counselor to be recording videos saying the things I wanted to say in the way that I wanted to say them. And that's where the idea of an AI character came about. So because I work in software as well, I'm not a coder, I'm not a programmer or anything. I work with businesses to understand how software can meet their needs,
Yeah.
their business needs. I'm a business analyst and software product owner.
Mhm.
And so having that background as well, it just all sort of came together all at the same time, and DiscoDoc was born. And when I
Yeah.
look back at the dates, I think there were 6 days between me setting up the initial channel where I tried to record myself and then setting up DiscoDoc. So it was that 6 day period is where the whole thing came to being.
And then you decided on the type of character you wanted to be, the AI character. And how was it for you then, um because when you watched your own video you felt quite uncomfortable and you didn't want to put it out. So how was it the first time you had a watch back at your first DiscoDoc video, with saying everything you wanted to say, but with this, AI character? How was that for you then?
Yeah, it's a great question. And when I think back, I still had a lot of the same insecurities. So, sort of imposter syndrome type thing, like who am I to have a YouTube channel? What right do I have to
Yeah,
to have a YouTube channel? And, why would people want to watch me even through the medium of that character? I was feeling that in those early days. And as you know, it can take a while to get momentum in terms of views, even then when it wasn't so saturated.
hmm
Um, However, because it was so different to anything else that was out there,
yeah,
those that watched it and got it and understood the humor and liked it, that it resonated with them, they really, really, really liked it. And
yeah,
so what that meant was that the comments straight away, the comment section was very, very active, and I would always jump in and respond to comments, and I would respond to comments through the persona of DiscoDoc. So,
okay,
being
right,
sarcastic with the humor,
yeah,
bringing that in, and that started to develop this incredible community that we have now in the Discord channel particularly. um and so, like anything really, it was just bit by bit, tentative step by tentative step, growing in confidence, pushing the boundaries a little bit more. And I'll tell you something else as well. For me, because I started reacting to Ren when there were very few Ren reactions and reactors, and there was no like, Ren Cyclopedia or
yeah,
Ren's face rabbit hole Facebook group,
yeah,
or
yeah,
any of the lore or the facts that Ren has released or that we've learned over the couple of years now.
yeah,
There was none of that, and so really, as a reactor, you had two options. Either you could break down the bars like Knox and BP were
yeah,
doing, or you could respond to the emotional content in some way, of course. But for me, there wasn't enough to grab hold of, to grasp
mm,
onto. And so through this character, roasting Ren, using humor, and really, like, my early videos were savage, really, really savage in roasting Ren, because that's all that I had,
yeah,
like.
yeah,
And you know what it's like when you have your constrained or limited resources. It forces you to think more creatively, to think
oh
outside
yeah,
the box, and
yeah.
that's exactly what happened in those early days, and that led to a big part of the whole personality of the channel, really.
And was there any time, because it's like, I feel like this type of situation with you being behind this character, and no one really knows who the real Disco Doc is at that time. So you're
Hmm.
kind of hiding behind this character, like we are kind of hiding behind our screens when we're in the comment section, and that
Hmm.
can lead, as we all know, to some, unkind comments, with some people, because it's impersonal, and no one knows who they are. So in that situation, like you hiding behind him, were there times where you caught yourself doing something and then thinking, I maybe can't go there, that's maybe a bit too far? Have there been some times where you redacted some of your stuff because you thought it was too much, or did you think, well, I can say whatever I want because it's this character saying it?
I mean, I've never deleted anything that I've put out. I've never redacted anything. But I suppose when you're putting out a video a week, let's say, for sake of argument, and you do have people commenting, then you'd be crazy not to listen to them.
Yeah,
Um, I've never particularly had. I'm thinking carefully about my words here, because in the Discord, for example, we have an ongoing conversation about things like political correctness and,
yeah,
what is fair game in
yeah,
2025,
yeah,
and what actually is out of bounds, and what is inappropriate but in a good way, versus actually that could really offend a certain subset of people here.
yeah, yeah,
And so no, I've never censored myself as such, but I do try to maintain that ongoing dialogue with the community, as we all do, hopefully, with the rest of the world, to try not to be completely tone deaf
yeah,
and alienate or offend people, because that's really not what it's about. I'm not trying to
oh,
offend anybody.
yeah,
And when Ren specifically reacted to one of my videos on a Twitch stream.
Yeah, it was the power video, wasn't it? I think.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
it. It provided great validation, not just for me, but for anybody that watched my video and thought, "Oh, is that a bit close to the bone?"
yeah,
For
yeah,
example, say in that very video, referring to for Ren as a filthy, druggy skank. Now,
yeah.
I not only am I a qualified practicing counsellor now, I've worked in social care in the past. I've managed care homes for adults with learning difficulties,
Yeah.
and always been at the periphery of things like addiction as well. So believe me when I say that calling somebody a filthy druggy skank through Doc's mouth was never intended to offend anybody, but that's the sort of things you have to sort of play with and figure out the boundaries and the lines as you go with any humor, I'd say, any comedy.
Course, of course. I think, but there's been such an evolution in comedy, and as you say, in humor in general, because we can see, like between the '90s and today, it's very, very different. And I mean,
Mhm.
there's so many people. If society had worked the same way in the '90s, I mean, probably 70% of comedians would have been cancelled straight away, because it's just,
Yeah.
there's some things, or even movies, that comedy is sometimes I watch and I think, oh, I haven't seen that in a while, and then now I hear it with a different, um I hear, yeah, I hear the words differently. It's like, it evolved so much in society. And I had that talk with Rosalie in our episode, because we were breaking, well, not really breaking down, but we started, our focal point was the song Suicide, and then we went from there and discussed the topic, like in general, and
Hmm.
how that is, how it's now a bigger conversation than it was before and everything. But then we touched upon the fact that it's, some people are now saying they are triggered by this or this word, and suicide can be one of those words. And we agreed on the point that this issue with triggering is actually much deeper, because it has not much to do with the word, but with what the person has been through and hasn't worked upon yet. And
Hmm.
so it's very frustrating for me sometimes, whether it be with, really those subjects, or with something like humor, which for me is then lighter, but then for another person can be really offending. And I think if something offends you, then it's because you have, core issue with it, that maybe you have to work on, to be a bit more comfortable in society in general. Because if we don't do that, then we'll just end up, hopping around and trying to always think about everything we're saying, and that can be really detrimental, I think, to conversations, actually.
Yes, I think that's a very valid point, and I think the fine line that we must walk, and we are sort of all trying to navigate, I think, is the line between that, which is very true, and obviously the fact that we've got centuries or decades or centuries of things like racism and sexism,
Oh,
and all the isms,
yeah,
and homophobia and so on.
yeah,
And so I do think that it's reasonable to expect terminology to change and
oh,
humor to change, and um, the subjects of humor, what's fair game and what isn't,
yeah,
must change with society. And I really do believe that. And I think that's different to what you were saying about sort of feeling like you have to tiptoe
yeah,
around certain subjects or certain words, or censor yourself, your own thought process and communication process overly.
mm.
um it's a balance between the two, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think it's just about, I think there's a big issue right now of a kind of a loss of conversation. There's a huge, we have a huge amount of information coming at us every day, and the intake of communicate, or yeah, general communication and information is huge. I mean, it's so much bigger than we were used to before the internet. And so
Mhm.
now people are constantly in contact and constantly talking, but still not always having the important conversations about things. And I think there's sometimes, yeah, a loss with all of the confirmation bias that we have
Yes.
also going on,
Yeah.
with social media, because then you tend to really stick to certain communities where everybody agrees with you and you don't have any confronting ideas coming up. And
That's,
so it always tends to put people in a very comfortable zone where they then in the end are not willing to have, difficult conversations anymore. But those conversations need to be had, and that's what really interested me with Ren and his lyrics and everything that he stands for when he talks in his interviews or in his Instagram stories, is really to push us to have some of those difficult conversations, because that's the only way we can find unity.
mm. Beautifully put. You put that very beautifully. I think
Like,
it's a dichotomy, isn't it? Because as you say, if you think about the internet at large, forgetting about paywalls and things, but the internet at large, we've got the entirety of human knowledge from all of history,
yeah,
and yet, exactly as you say, particularly through social media in its various forms, you end up with these echo chambers. And so what you're doing then is filtering out 99.9999999% of all that available information, and with the confirmation bias, just hearing what you want to hear.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, I think that's he's not the only one doing it, but he's one of those that is voicing it the most. So, and I think
Mm,
it's really beautiful to see how he's been, gaining momentum in this past year, particularly because I see it's like his channel is, well, his YouTube channel, also his the rest of his socials are growing exponentially, because
yeah.
he hit 1 million like July or August last year, and now he's almost at 2. So that's really, really a huge jump, in a few months. And I think if it continues in the next 2 or 3 years, he's going to be a huge deal in
Hmm.
the music industry. And I think that's really wonderful to see people like him growing, because it's going to really push conversation. I think that's really, really great. But so you were, so you got invested quite quickly then with uh,
I
yourself,
was
but
all
then
in.
also with the channel. You got invested in Ren and his story.
Yes, I was all in. I'm curious as to your thoughts on what do you think makes Ren, his music and his story, so universally appealing. And by that I mean, if you look at the breakdown, I think he has such a varied demographic, fan base. Like,
I
there are people of all ages from all backgrounds that are resonating with something, and it might not always be the same thing, but
Yeah,
I just think with Ren it seems to be so much more than with other artists, that it's this universal appeal. And what do you think is that?
I was thinking about that. I don't remember which conversation, yeah, which episode I had this conversation with someone, but I feel like I've noticed something in the more poignant songs that he has, because he does songs for fun, and then he
Mm,
does, the real deal ones, and those important songs where he really pours his soul into the lyrics. I've seen that there's a structure that is always the same. He goes from first talking about only himself and his internal dialogue and what he is experiencing as an individual, to then at some point in the song opening up the lyrics to something that is universal and
mm,
that touches everyone on, human subject matters. And so I think that's the kind of the gateway, for every person that comes from a different culture, different background, religion, whatever, to feel connected to him. Because if he were only talking about really, really uh, individual things that happened only to him and he was never opening that door, then
Mm.
maybe his entire community would be only people with Lyme disease or,
No.
chronic illnesses. But the fact that he's always going from something personal to something universal in every song, and I've really seen that. I've analyzed the lyrics, of the different songs of Sick Boy. You can see it in Sick Boy. He starts the first half of the song is only about him and what he experienced. But then in the second half, he starts talking about the music industry. So that touches
Mm.
all of the independent artists. He talks about greed and money and how society works. So that has nothing to do with him as an individual anymore, but us
Yes.
as a people. So I think that's really the trick that he's using that is so effective. And then you can reverse it because you can be touched by some of his lyrics that are universal and then go back to what he's saying about him. And if you have some empathy, then you get invested in him as a person, even if you're not going through the same thing. So I think that's a nice trick he's doing, where everyone can feel seen and heard and interpret the lyrics as their own.
Yeah, I think that's well observed, and I think he does that very well, doesn't he? So, thinking about a lot of classic songs that aren't Ren. I'm not going to try and name any now, but just thinking of thematically about classic songs that have sort of stood the test of time. They don't do that, do they? They don't zoom in and zoom out, zoom into a story and then zoom out to society and have that aha moment of, that's how it relates to me.
Mm. Yeah, I think so too. I haven't, and even we were. I was, thinking about the song "Suicide" having those two opposite views of the same situation. And I thought, well, there have been so many artists that have touched upon that subject, that have talked about their own mental health issues. And in the past 15, 20 years, we've had a lot in the rock and punk scene, people talking about those subjects. Kurt Cobain has touched upon it in, many songs. And then, there are entire albums from Linkin Park going into that issue, but then they always stay extremely poetic but extremely personal. And so I think that is where, some people do really relate to those lyrics, but they don't have the same global impact that he
Mhm.
has. So it's something I think more and more artists are going to touch upon those subjects anyway, because they are the problems of our modern world. So we can't really escape all of that. Yeah, I think it's going to maybe be there's going to be some wind of change there.
Another thing that I talked about with Ray was, I think it was the perfect storm when High Rain came out, because it was so impactful and people wanted to react to it or see, feel their initial reaction themselves again, experience it
Yeah,
through another reactor.
yeah.
But if it had just been that, if that had been his first song or his only song, or there hadn't been 20 years or whatever it was catalogue of such varied and fantastic
Oh,
music, then it might have just fizzled out there and then. It might have been, as he says, as Ren jokes about, being a TikTok sensation. That might have
yeah,
been it.
yeah.
But obviously, people reacted to High Ren, and then they were like, oh, that's quite a good song, and oh, look at this, and look at this, and look how many different genres he spans, and how
Yeah.
the hell does he do that as well as he does that, as well as he does that. And it was just like this endless mine to tap into, and
Oh, yeah.
then adds, obviously how supportive Ren has been of the reaction community and
Yeah.
monetizing and all the rest of it. And it was almost like, looking back, it's almost like, how could it not happen? It had to happen at that
Oh,
point.
yeah. Yeah. Of course. And I think there's I don't believe in fate, as in we have one path we're on and that's our life and it's just how it's going to be. But I do believe in life paths, and that we choose the paths. We come to, at certain points, we arrive at crossroads and we choose
Mhm.
which path we want to go on, and that's going to determine, the next crossroad and so on. And I think that with everything he's been through, the mix of his talent and because there's really he has a real gift that is not just being a good guitarist or being a good singer. He does really have a gift, and so I think there are some people who are just born with talent. You know, there are some that are overflowing with talent, and he is. And so I think this combined with what he had to go through, and what he's still going through, was just like the perfect catalyst, you know, to make of him some type of, don't want to say prophet in that sense, but some type of beacon, you know, for a certain community. So that was obviously the only way for him to heal certain parts of himself, because as he says, I think it's not about, he's never tried to write a number one hit. He's always written what he feels is right for him. And then if people are interested, then he's, you know, he's really happy with it. But he's never written a song for other people. He's always written his songs for himself and to heal his own wounds. And I think that's what makes him so great at what he does, because he's not trying to write hit songs that are going to
Yeah, yeah.
go out.
I've got a reaction to his 1 million subscribers video coming out on Friday, and in it I weave in some interview from Rick Rubin, the famous music producer,
Yeah.
and that's one of the things that he says is forget about the audience. You know, it's not so. People often say you need to be in tune with the audience. Almost you need to pander to the audience. He says forget about the audience.
I
If
know.
you need to be congruent and authentic and true to yourself and create art that satisfies you and scratches that itch.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's not art, it's just commerce.
Yeah, exactly. And I think this music has become such a huge industry, and it's so easy for any artist to get swallowed by that business and that industry. And there have been many, I suppose, many, you know, great artists who have been signed by some huge labels, and they did, you know, those one hit wonders where the label in the end said, oh yeah, you should really do this song because, you know, that's what's going to work next summer, so really do that one. And then we never hear from them again. And I suppose there are some in there that are really, really good musicians and really great artists, and that got completely squashed by the industry. And you know, I've done a I put a reel on my Instagram, and to tell people about the documentary about Avicii that's
Mm-hmm.
on Netflix. And you know, that's typically the situation, because he's very much like Ren in a lot of ways. He started, you know, producing music when he was really young, and he got really into, you know, making beats and trying stuff out, and he was really having a lot of fun. And then when he got really, really big, suddenly he had the pressure from the industry, you know, raining down on him. And then at some point in the documentary, he says he got to a point where it wasn't fun anymore at all, and it was just work, and he
Yeah.
just had to, you know, to manage to stay on top. And
Yeah.
it was, and he wasn't in love with the music at all anymore. And then yeah, then in the end we know that he passed. And so it's really those situations, I think, occur more often than we know of.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really, really important that there is some change that has to be made in the industry for people like Ren to continue to thrive, because there are so many that have, you know, real talent, and that are beautiful artists, and that really just want to show or showcase who they are as an authentic artist. And I think that's really, really important, but it's almost impossible to do with big labels now.
Yeah. I watched the Avicii thing a couple of nights ago, and yeah, it just brings back many memories of people like Amy Winehouse, and you
Yeah,
mentioned Kurt Cobain and Linkin Park, obviously, as well. And it's so so tragic. And I think the tragedy with the music industry is not only the artists that it's squashing within the music industry, like you talk about one hit wonders and stuff, but the fact that it's this juggernaut that works against independent artists like Ren, you know, being able to succeed as well.
yeah, yeah, sure. Well, on a lighter note, because I can go really deep into that stuff, but I really want to know more about you. So, once you with the channel, to get back to that, once you got a little bit of traction there and people pouring into your community, and that went on for what then, 1.5 or 2 years almost, until you decided to do the reveal. So at what point, what was the moment, because you probably do remember, what was the one moment where you thought, maybe I'll show my face, or let's do this? What made the change?
It's funny because as you were saying that, I realised that I've got two lights, which you can't see obviously, but one here where it's bright and the other one's failed. So it looks a bit like a high ren or a high doc moment, doesn't
Yeah,
it? Funny, the light and the dark.
yeah,
Um, so in terms of masking and eventually revealing my identity, the whole stick there, I explained how I started out coming to that decision. Then what happened in the early days was people started to say in the comments, well, we don't know who this person is. And they seem to know an awful lot about Ren, and they seem to be getting reactions out very, very quickly to new Ren songs. And they
yeah,
seem to have insider information. So
yeah.
either it's Ren, or it's a family member, or it's somebody from his team. And this went on for a very long time. And I only ever replied with one thing, one statement, which was, I can neither confirm nor deny any such rumors. That's all I ever said. That's all I ever said. um, the whole way through. And obviously, I leaned into that a little bit because it helped the channel, but also it felt like it was helping bring people together, because everybody loves a mystery, don't they?
Oh yeah,
And just the thought that they could be communicating with Ren. Lots of people said along the way, Ren perhaps has to be a bit careful with his social media channels and have his formal official voice, if you like. So maybe this is a way of him expressing himself under the radar.
which could
Um,
have been. I mean, it's not a stupid idea, right? I mean,
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
and it could have, knowing a little bit about him and this type of humor, it could have been him. It could have.
Yes, yeah, exactly, and that's why it fitted so well, really, because in a parallel universe, it could just as easily have been the case.
Oh yeah.
um, and I think what happened for me was it reached the end of its usefulness for the channel, and so my subscribers grew fairly quickly at the start, and then plateaued very quickly. And same with my Patreon members as well. So I've had some amazing loyal patron members from the very start, that frankly the channel wouldn't be here now if it wasn't for them jumping in as early as they did and continuing to support the channel throughout. But it did plateau early on. It just it rose, and then it flattened, and it stayed there.
Mm,
And I, as you do, tried to sort of look at the analytics and speak to people and figure out what was going on and what wasn't really working with the channel, what was putting new people off potentially. And it always seemed to come back to um, some people just can't get over the AI face, the AI voice, the deadpan delivery, the monotone text to speech voice that I use for Doc. Although there's 10 million other channels where you can see real human faces, some people are just never going to click on to watch the video or to subscribe, and that's that. There's no human element there.
yeah.
So that played on my mind for a long while. And then I think the other thing was, to be really honest, it was exhausting. So imagine not only creating the content regularly as we both do, which takes its toll anyway,
Oh yeah.
um, and managing that around a demanding full-time job, career, and family. I've got two young children. I've got a girl who's 9 and a boy who is 12.
Mm,
Um, Obviously, they were a couple of years younger back then as well.
mm,
Um, all of that, and then all of that, and then trying to respond really quickly when Ren did put a new song out, because I've only ever had early access to one of Ren's songs, which was Slaughterhouse. Every other one I've managed to put reactions out, usually within 2 or 3 hours,
Yeah.
including the process of, writing doc script, recording it all, editing it all, exporting it, uploading it, YouTube checking
Which
it, and
which I
everything.
want to say, for those who are watching this video and don't know anything about doing this, is amazing to do this, to do that amount of work in 2 or 3 hours. And especially the exporting process can take quite some of that time. So
Yeah.
yeah, it is really amazing that you worked so fast every time and did that. It's really, really great. I think it's, not everyone does it that way.
Yeah, so and it was a thrill, it was exciting, and it was fun, but it started to take its toll, to be
Yeah.
honest. And when you combine all of that with just keeping up a pretense, essentially I was quite literally really wearing a mask. And
Yeah.
what I have found interesting is that within my community in Discord, for example, even when I was just DiscoDoc before the reveal, I felt most able to just be myself, to be authentic, to be congruent, to talk as I would talk to a friend down the pub, for example, um, within that community. And I think so. So I think that genuine friendships and associations have been formed within that community anyway. Um, but to flip flop almost between now I'm being congruent and oh now I need to be a bit vague and mysterious, and oh now I need to be a bit misleading to keep up the pretense of that. Could it be Ray, and could it be this person, could it be that
Yeah.
person? Ultimately it just wasn't working for me or the channel anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. And so once you got to the point where you made that decision, how did you feel? Because that takes you all the way back mentally to that first video that you didn't want to post.
Mm-hmm.
So after all of that time pretending to be somebody completely different and then deciding to do a 1 hour video where it's just your face on camera,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
how did you feel about that then, with all of that experience gone by?
I, well, I decided in December that there were two ways that I could go with it. Either it could be sort of a soft launch, a bit of a whimper, whereby I don't do any announcements, and come New Year's Day, I just stick out a video and it's me. And now
Hi.
everybody, yeah, yeah, and now the world needs to get used to it. um, weirdly, and I don't know why, and I'll have to do the inner work to look at this. Thank you. Weirdly, that worried me more than the route I did go. And the route I went was I decided that the community did deserve a little bit of warning. There were a lot of people that were very invested in the channel, but invested in the Doc character. And
Yeah.
actually, a lot of people in Discord have said over the couple of years, they've said things like, I feel able to be myself here. And a lot of that started because of the anonymous Doc character being
Oh,
the leader, quote unquote, leader of
yeah.
the of that space. So creating that
Right.
safe space was
Right.
this anonymous figure, and there was safety for some people with that. So I was mindful of that, and I gave 4 weeks notice. I gave a month's notice, and I decided rather than a whimper, I'd go for the big bang approach, really. So I got people like Black Pegasus and lots of different reactors, amazing, lovely people that I've worked with or that I respect, and anybody that wanted to be involved, really, that I'd sort of reached out to in confidence. And got them to record short clips of them saying, "Will the real Disco Doc stand up?" And then use them in these weekly countdowns till the big event, the big reveal on New Year's Day. So all of that being said, your question was, how did I feel? And to be honest, I was terrified. I was absolutely terrified. I was terrified because I'd be putting myself out there, I'd be vulnerable, I'd be doing all those things that I was so scared of 2 years ago, as you said. And also, as I said in the reveal video, it's like it could have been a bad thing for the channel. It was a risk, you know. It might. It's so far. I think I've gained 100 subs, and you know that's great. And hello to hello to all those 100 people. But it's not like it's, you know, I've suddenly gone from 4,000 to 40,000 or anything like that.
No,
So
but on the other hand, it could have tanked the channel too.
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That's my point. Exactly that. Yeah. It could have gone the other way, and it could have been like, well, now I've got to close this channel. It could have been complete indifference, like,
Mm.
you know, like people are just like, okay, well, whatever, don't care, and that would have been just as hurtful and damaging potentially for me myself. So it was a big deal. I know it's just YouTube, and it's just reaction videos, and it's just entertainment. But we're all real people, and yeah, I was very scared. I was very, very nervous and anxious, as were a lot of people in my community as well. So I'm very grateful that it went well, and so far seems to be well received.
Yeah, I think so too. And I have seen, different comments about what you did, and I think mostly people see it in a positive way and are happy to see who you are, and that because it's also comforting to see that it's a real person behind that character, and
Yeah.
not just a bot. Because now we're getting in a very weird world where the line between what's real and what's fake is going to be slimmer and slimmer over the next few years. So I think
Yes.
it's also somehow a little bit comforting, even for the people who felt it was a safe space, to see you now and maybe get accustomed to who you are, and then maybe understand that DiscoDoc is actually you, and that those are your thoughts, and to
Mm.
to get more and more comfortable with you as a person. And so I think that's really great. So yeah, and what are the future projects now? Because then you decided to do this big reveal, and I know that you've been thinking about different projects of what you could do with the platform. So
Mm.
what are your ideas for 2025 or the next few years?
Yeah, so the big one at the forefront of my mind at the moment is last year I came up with and Doc hosted. I didn't host it. Doc hosted a rap competition, and it was for Ren reactors who also rap. So I noticed as I started out as a viewer, a consumer of Ren reactions, and continue to this day to watch Ren reactions myself. I noticed that there were plenty of channels out there where their reactors were actually wrapped themselves, and they had their own content out there. And so I wanted to, in the spirit of a rising tide, I wanted to create a competition to showcase some of that, as
Mhm.
well as beat makers as well. So we had Vintage Even Star and Vexo, who both um, who produce beats, who
Yeah,
both have links to the Reniverse as well.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so, as did each of the judges as well. So at the forefront of my mind is season 2, and as of yesterday, I'm able to announce that the first 2 judges are going to be Uncle Ray and Mark Hector from Brain Squeeze
Oh,
Reactions.
great. That's
So
wonderful.
they are going to be very, very entertaining, I should
Oh,
imagine.
yeah, it's going to be fire. Yeah, that's really, really good information there. People are going to love that.
Yes, and the other thing that's been amazing from season 1 is that we've seen those 6 contestants. Some of them have collaborated since. They've put out tracks together, or they're working on things. They got things in the pipeline. So real bonds have been formed, and and new collabs and material is coming out that just wouldn't have existed if it wasn't for that. So that's really nice.
Yes, it would be just really great to have something that unites not only the renegades, but also other people who maybe haven't heard about Ren and don't know about him, and bring all of those people together for some important causes. So yeah, I think that would be really, really great. There's such a power sleeping there. I think that we have to use somehow.
Mhm.
It was really wonderful meeting you. I'm really so happy we could do this together, and thank you so much for taking the time for my channel. I was really happy.
Oh, no, it's a pleasure. Happy to talk again sometime for sure.
Yeah, thank you so much. We'll see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.